Hello, and welcome to Chaos in the Class. I am Mrs. Fuller. So, we have gotten all of our Illiad books out, and we're discussing Kingfisher epics, the Illiad. And this version is retold by Nick McCarty. Now, the read aloud is by Mrs. Fuller, Brenda Fuller, and illustrated by Victor Ambrose. So this is really getting good. We're going to start at page 69 today. Nope, just kidding. I think it was around the 30s, actually. I think it's page 69 in your books. Let's see if we can find our story. Okay, we were already past the battle goes on. I love all the rich illustrations. We passed all about Hector and his character. Hector's going, get out there and fight. Look at that picture. I love it. We've already passed the champions meet. Oh, here we are. We just finished the champions meet. Remember, the sun is going down. It was really getting to a good part. Look at all that battle gear. Okay, here we are. We're starting with the burials. It should be page 69 in your book. The burials. Along the walls of Troy, sentries kept watch over the plain above the beaches and the shadows of the Greek ships. Okay, the best way to talk about sentries is that word sentries is really a job in the army. Okay, they're kind of like the lookouts. So they're in charge of making sure that they cry out or holler out, hey, there's people coming. Okay, so the sentries are keeping watch. So along the walls of Troy, remember there's this huge stone/brick walls, really stone, giant stones, so that it protects the city of Troy. So the sentries are keeping watch, and they're looking over the plain above the beaches and the shadows of the Greek ships. Small fires glinted across the plain and down toward the sea as the Greek warriors cleaned their weapons, repaired their dented armors, and cooked their rations of meat and bread. Soon they would pour a little wine from their wineskins onto the ground as libations to Zeus, the father of the gods. So once again, the author is making sure everybody knows Zeus is the father of the gods. He's like the big dude. Okay, well, let's talk about some of this other stuff that's going on. The author puts in small fires glinted across the plain. In other words, you see these little sparks of fires going on, but the author didn't just put, hey, they lit their fires. Think about the author is putting in some real colorful words, and you want to do that when you're doing your writing. Okay, small fires glinted across the plain and down toward the sea as the Greek warriors cleaned their weapons, repaired their dented armor. So remember, they had to make those repairs. They can't just show up to battle with all this dents in them, and cooked their rations of meat and bread. Soon, they would pour a little wine from their wineskins. So I want you to think about a flask. Usually it has a strap on it. It's made from sinew or the tendons of deer to hold their wine, because it'll dry up in the sun, and they can make it nice, and they can shape it and make it nice and hard so that they can pour something in there and it won't come out. They didn't have just water bottles to, hang out with. They didn't have like an ice chest full of water like we do at field day or something. They had to tote all of that themselves. And remember, if they're down there at the sea, what kind of water are they getting? Salt water. You're not going to be able to drink that. They're going to have to get their water from another source. Okay. After drinking, they would lie under the black sky and the shimmering points of starlight and sleep. In Agamemnon's, in Agamemnon's hut, the chieftains honored the bravery of Ajax. The high king served him his food first and poured the first wine for him to make a suitable offering to the gods so that the warriors could then eat and drink. Nestor, the wise man, stood and asked to speak. The others fell silent. I suggest we offer a truce to the Trojans so that we can collect our dead. They will want to do the same. Then we may burn our friends and collect their bones to take back to their sons and wives. So that's what they're offering is what's called cremation. So they're going to bring back the ashes and the bones. At the same time, we should build a line of defense to protect our ships. I suggest a deep ditch and a wooden and stone wall with gates wide enough to allow our war chariots through. The Greeks agreed. Now, guys, they don't have anything, big machines to dig with. All of this would have to be done by hand. So my thought is, how are they going to actually pull this feat off? How are they going to be able to do this? How are they going to be able to just dig a deep ditch with what tools and a wooden and stone wall? These stones have got to be massive. How are they going to make this happen? And then build a gate. So now the Greeks all agree, hey, that's a good idea. Meanwhile, on the silent streets inside Troy's walls, nothing moved. But in King Priam's palace, men and women had gathered to honor Hector for his courage. So each side is honoring their big, courageous guys. One man turned the celebration sour. Antenor stood and suggested that it was time to bring the war to an end. Helen should be given back, together with all of the treasures that Paris brought with her from Sparta. We promise that when Menelaus stood in combat against Paris and beat him, not to do so dishonors us. So see, they didn't live up to their deal of the bargain. They still have Helen, they still have the treasures, and Menelaus had already beat Paris fair and square. So he's saying, man, this is dishonoring us to do it this way. Paris naturally was against the idea. He reluctantly offered to pay back all he had taken when he left Sparta with Helen, wife of Menelaus, but Helen he would not return. Priam felt that was as much as anyone could expect and suggested they send a messenger to King Agamemnon to see if he would agree. They could also suggest to the Greeks that they be allowed to collect their dead before the fighting was resumed. King Priam's men agreed. The next morning, the Greeks welcomed a truce, but they refused to accept Paris's offer unless Helen was also returned to them. So as the sun rose, spraying golden light across the hills and down toward the Greek ships, small groups of men could be seen spreading out from the gates of Troy and up from the beaches and ships of the Greeks. So once again, that author is painting a picture to us. So as the sun rose, spraying golden light across the hills and down toward the Greek ships. Isn't that beautiful, the way that author put that? Small groups of men could be seen spreading out from the gates of Troy and up from the beaches and ships of the Greeks. Carefully, the Greeks collected the bodies of their friends and washed them. So they're being very ceremonious about this. They gathered sticks, branches, and driftwood into huge piles. Often they gently laid the bodies with their armor and offerings of food and wine. Remember, they're making offerings to the gods. Soon, the Trojans on the walls and the guards along the beaches saw coils of pale smoke rising from countless Peries. It was desolate work. Meanwhile, the Greeks did as Nestor suggested and built a defensive wall across the approaches to the beaches to protect their ships. Zeus, Lord of Lightning, I love the way that the author gives us some of that, gives us the players, Zeus, Lord of Lightning, so he can control the lightning, looked down from Olympus as the Greeks built their wall. Poseidon, the earth shaker. So what do you think Poseidon is? Remember, in mythology, it's unexplained natural phenomena that are going on. So what do you think an earth shaker would be? Did you come up with an earthquake? So Poseidon, the earth shaker. So anytime they think that if there was an earthquake, they think it was Poseidon was doing it, that was angry. Poseidon, the earth shaker, watching with him, was angry. They haven't asked us. They haven't poured libations. They haven't prayed or sacrificed so much as a herring. Now, a herring is a fish that nobody likes to eat because it's too salty. You might hear something called a red herring. And that wall is a huge work that will be famous, even more famous than the walls Apollo and I have built. Poseidon grumbled. So his grumbling is earthquake. Zeus laughed. Don't worry about your memorials, old earth shaker. You will always be famous. A single storm will blow away their work. You can see to that. And tomorrow they'll be at each other's throats again for our amusement. Small groups of men in the killing zone worked to untangle friends. Look at these pictures. Kind of describes what's going on. So they're carrying off their battle buddies that didn't make it. They're washing their battle buddies. They're placing them ceremoniously on the fire to take back their ashes and bones to their wives. So the bodies locked in death with enemies and bodies. They kicked away the carrion birds. Now, carrion birds are birds that eat on prey, eat on dead stuff. Those are those turkey vultures, things like that. So they kicked away the carrion birds, already pecking at the eyes, and spilled entrails and carried the mangled remains to the Peries. They honored their dead friends and sent them quietly to Hades. The sun set again, and to the sentries watching from the high walls of Troy, it seemed as if the smoldering, sputtering flames of the 5,000 funeral Peries were reflected in the stars. Across the dark sky, lightning flickered and thunder rolled in a never-ending warning. Zeus was restless. Do-do-do. Zeus is ready for the fight, for his entertainment. Okay, to battle again. It was early. The sun glinted palely across the dry dust of the plain and glittered on the edge of the sea. The two armies prepared to fight again. In Olympus, Zeus was not in the best of moods. He called a meeting of the gods, determined that none should meddle in the battle but him. The other gods listened in fear, and they trembled as his words thundered around the mountaintops. Anyone who disobeys me, he looked sharply at his wife Hera and at Athene and Apollo. Anyone who even dares to think about helping Trojans or Greeks, I will hurl into the deepest yawning chasm of Tartarus. No one will interfere in this battle, not even if their favorite is being butchered. Do you hear me, Aphrodite? The shining goddess nodded, for once unable to speak for fear of Zeus. If anyone defies me, I will take earth and heaven and sea and hang them all over the darkest chasm and leave them and you dangling. At last, Athene found her tongue. Father Zeus, we are sorry for the terrible fate of the armies below. The gods could see the Greek army standing ready in the killing field. Rushing out of the Trojan gates came war chariots and as many men as there are stubble spears after a harvest. Zeus let loose a thunderclap, and the battle began. First, the slashing hiss of volleys of arrows. Now, I want you to think about a volleyball going back and forth, okay? So, first, the slashing hiss of volleys of arrows, followed by the clatter of hurled javelins as they were deflected off of shield and breastplate, and thuds as they crashed into throats and breasts and skulls. Ugh! Desperate sounds of sword on bronze, sword on bone, and piercing, terrible cries of dying men filled the air in an endless roar as if as if earth itself was an animal crying out in terror over the world. Back and forth the battle raged. Diomedes was almost killed when Hector attacked. He was forced to run, and Hector shouted out abuse after the brave Greek. Zeus flung a bolt of lightning that burned the ground and flayed all it touched. It terrified the Greeks, who believed it was a sure sign that Zeus was on the side of the Trojan forces. So there you see Zeus with the lightning bolt. Hera begged Poseidon to do something to curb the Trojans, but even the Lord of Earthquake dared not defy Zeus. The Greeks were forced back. It was a chaos of death in the deep ditch that they had dug in front of their wall. Agamemnon called on the Greeks to rally together. Privately, he begged Zeus not to let them die in this trap of their own making. Zeus was moved and sent a sign. An eagle flew over the nearby hillside with a fawn in its claws. Well, it would be in his talons, but it's his claws. The huge bird climbed high up over the battlefield until it was over the Greeks. Then it dropped the fawn. So I want you to think about a fawn. A fawn is a baby deer. So an eagle was able to snatch a baby deer, fly over the battlefield, and then dropped it when it was over the Greeks. The Greeks saw this as a sign that Zeus had changed his mind, and they threw themselves against their enemy with all the joy of battle. Zeus knew the pain and suffering on the battlefield. He turned away, and the warriors fought on. Okay, we are going to stop there for today, and we will pick up at Zeus's message next. All right, y'all have a great day. Enjoy reading your books, and remember that you are applying things as you're reading. You're thinking about who are the players, who are the great gods. Remember, mythology is going to have gods and goddesses. They're going to have heroes and heroines. They're going to have unexplained big events, just like the earthquake or a flood or a tsunami or a volcano. We haven't seen that in this reading yet, but just remember to apply those kinds of things as you are thinking and reading. Also, I want you to remember the ways that the author is adding those rich figurative language in there. You see some similes, you see metaphors. Remember, similes are going to have like and as in it. A metaphor is going to be something equals something. The sun is a glittering flame. That would be your metaphor. Just remember as you are reading to think about questions that you might have. You're like, oh my gosh, I wonder if this is going to happen. We've already had some foreshadowing where the author puts something in there and you hear that do, what's going to happen? I'm kind of excited to wonder about this gate and this fence and this big stone wall that the Greeks are putting up. Where is this coming in to play? because I have a feeling something's going to happen. I don't know. This is my first time to read the Iliad, and I'm reading it right along with y'all. So this is kind of exciting. I look forward to talking to y'all tomorrow on our next Read Aloud. Have a great day. Enjoy reading.